difficult to do something about locally. This is also important. This list is not intended to be a list stating things were better before.
But they were.
But it's simply an attempt to understand what influences workload and what our options of doing something about it is. And it's also very important for me to say that this is not an act of resource. This is more proven experience, or at least it's my experience. So let's get through the blacklist, and don't hesitate to ask if something is unclear. As I said, I divided the list into 3 parts: governance steering, the work, and expectations. This is my choice. Another person might have chosen something else. But we will, of course, start with steering or governance, and I'm talking about both formal and informal steering. And of course, in the 90s, everything was about regulations, and the steering was quite simple, national steering. My first head once told me that in the 80s, when someone asked him something, he could just turn around to his bookshelf and take out the right binder and give the right answer, because everything was regulated. But he also played a lot of golf in the afternoon, so I don't know if that was... Well, as you know, now it's very different. Municipality steering, that was the first big reform, 1990, and then we made a market of the school system, and then I think the authorities, they thought, we have to control this, we have to look into how is it functioning, and then came the Swedish School Inspectorate and so on, and a lot more control, and in that time also we start with constant streamlining, or called new public management. And in my school we see this very clear right now, handling this year's budget. The salaries for teachers are rising, but our school budget is not getting compensation for this in our budget. So it can mean that teachers have to run a little bit faster. And we, as you know, we have unregulated total teaching hours. And of course this is not a healthy combination. Higher and higher salaries, constant streamlining, and unregulated teaching hours. Well, student funding. You see, there is an empty area. We didn't have that in the 1990s. And now, you know, each student lost creates a hole in the school's budget. And I don't know about you, but I think our teachers are very aware of this. Once a parent who wanted a daughter to change class, which was impossible, called me and said, "You get 70,000 for my daughter every year. Do you really want to lose them when I put my daughter in another school? And what would your boss say about this?" Well, I said, "I take the risk." So, and then of course we have other requirements, control checks. In the 1990s we had grading meetings because we had a relative grading system, and sometimes you had to have meetings there you defend your grading. And now we have a lot of additional requirements and control. as you all know. And what about the competition? Well, in the 90s, you simply went to the nearest school, most of the time. And now we have a wealth of options. I remember when this starting, we were so surprised that it wasn't enough to have a good school. You have to market it, you have to tell everyone, and you have to put money in it. And this next part, I think it's quite interesting. The role of the teacher has gone from individual freedom, trust from employer, to more collective cooperation, regulated work hours. But if you look at the role of a student, you go the other way, from seeing a student as one in the class, one in the collective, to the extreme individuality that we have right now. And the approach from the student to the student have also changed. In the 90s, we wanted them to become good citizens of society. And now it's a whole different thing. We are now talking about the whole person, not only the student. Many schools also talk about their students as customers or clients. The customer is always right? And the salary, as we remember, before we had a teacher's role as an individual, but with tariff system, and now we have more, we need our teachers to work together, but they have an individual salary. Something is wrong there. And career opportunities, well, they haven't changed that much, but we have a lot more developing leaders now, both in school and on a municipality level. And we talk a lot about constant development, and often it is top down, not bottom up, as it should be, I think, according to our needs in our schools. We have, I told my boss last year that next year we are not developing anything, we are just going to refine, and he almost went crazy, because it's in your system, you have to develop all the time. Well, that was governance steering. And what about the actual work? Of course, the curriculum has changed from a uniform content to something else. You could say that with the J11 it became necessary with several general guidelines from the Swedish National Agency for Education. Very many guidelines. Its vague nature maybe gives the individual teacher a great deal of choice, resulting in making consensus on the subjects impossible. And, well, workplace, it was flexible in the 90s. You could choose where you wanted to work outside the classroom, at home or in school. And now it's more fixed. You have 35 regulated hours every week. And many schools want the teachers to work those hours in the school. And what about equivalent knowledge? Well, in the 90s, students arrive from a lower level with, in principle, equivalent knowledge. And now it's not like that. We all know that. And I know it for sure because we receive students for 123 different schools because we have all the aesthetic program. So we see these differences between schools, between the knowledge and between the grading. And I'm prepared to say that we still have relative grades, relative grading. Yes?
Do you see that in all programs, for example, the theoretical programs like natural sciences? Do you see that in those programs?
Oh, yes.
Or,
oh, yes.
despite the fact that you enroll students,
I think
or
other
pupils
people
with
have
high grades.
Yes,
only.
yes. It's hard to get into our programs.
Yes.
So all the students have high grades, but they're not worth the same.
Good.
It depends on what school you have been to.
Which tells you.
Yeah, well, you can make your own conclusions. Yeah, of course. Where am I? Form tutor. You probably all remember your own tutors. They didn't have this range of tasks to go through. It's much more complex now with many more tasks and a lot more responsibility and a lot more collaboration and dealing with study techniques and so on. Takes a lot of time and it's very stressful. And what about team coordinator, work group leaders? We didn't have that. We didn't in our school and the schools I've been working for these 20 years. We haven't had any work groups based on programs. We've only had work groups based on subjects. So that's a new thing. And you see the long list with tasks that didn't exist before. And even so, I think I forgot a huge task to discuss the students' well-being. And I don't know, sometimes it's difficult to tell what came first, but perhaps the introductions of teams based on programs at the expense of subject groups has shifted focus from knowledge to care. Could be. Well, yes?
Yeah, no, you shifted, but the level of parental intervention must have increased. My parents, for instance, never set their foot in my secondary school.
I'm coming to that.
Yeah, because that's part of the mentorship, I thought.
Yes, it is.
You will elaborate.
And of course, it's part of the expectations
And
on
it's
all teachers.
Yeah, and also, I mean, a reflection of the loss of autonomy of school.
Yes.
This idea that as a parent I have it's my right, you mentioned it yourself, including blackmailing, using the system of school pay. That opens up for these very dangerous operations from
I saw someone on Twitter who said that a parent called him, his daughter was 16 years old, and he called the mentor and said, could you look out for my daughter so she eats an apple every afternoon? 16 years old. Well, so something has happened. Yes. Well, head of subject in some ways it has changed, but not so much. I can't find the paper now, so. More tasks, of course, more meetings, I think, more demands. And the team coordinator, workgroup leader, did we talk about this? No. Well, you didn't have those before. So participate in work groups, you didn't have to do that, and now you do it a lot. Teaching lowest level, well, it's, well, I don't know. In our school, to meet all this, various conditions and all the must you have to do as a teacher, we have introduced basundervisning. That was part of the revolution group. We said, how can we meet this? How can we make a frame of every lesson that benefits all the students, but especially those who need the framework. I will link to what we have done. And we have looked at it now, and we see that, yes, we're doing well. It helps with a very clear system for everybody. View of knowledge, well, it has changed too, I think, from schooling, education built on facts, to education that must be useful, entrepreneurship, skills and abilities. And of course, digitalization is, well, I don't know where to begin. It's not about school only, but we have all participated in the digital race to compete with private schools, and we're still racing, and that has been and is still a very costly, expensive race. And well, the teaching platforms are not always working our way, you could say. Maybe the day's understatement. And what about grades assessment? Well, I told you before, we had grades for every subject. We have the relative grading system. We discussed grades with the pupils at the end of term, focus on knowledge, and we did an overall assessment. Well, I'm glad this seems to be coming back, this overall system assessment. But I think it will be a slow operation. We get a lot of students from lower levels that are so used with matrix, and they ask for, where is the matrix? So I know what to learn, what to know. So I think we have a long way. And the national tests, of course, we all know that they have changed too. They have been very many. Conferences and meetings have also grown, you could say, because we have so many groups that we are supposed to attend to. As I said, we have tried to reduce those at my schools, but if we want teachers to cooperate, we do have to have some groups, but they have to be meaningful. Otherwise, they're just stressful. Skills development for teachers. They were better before. Often individually chosen, and often from a set range, often from universities. Good quality, often. And now they're not so individually chosen, often formalized, and we have seen a lot of inspirational lectures. Collaboration, I think back in the 90s you knew what teacher you found interesting to collaborate with, and you found the room and time for it, and now it's more formula, and it's not voluntary, and it's often in work groups, and, so it has changed too. More of the freedom has changed, I think. The information, of course, it had changed. It would be surprising if it wasn't. And it's a problem, I think you all know, because it's both analog and digital, and very many schools are telling everyone everything regardless, just to cover all bases. And you have your fine digital system, and the students are looking only if the teachers are sick and not on anything else, maybe in Google Classroom too. Documentation and teaching materials, this has increased a lot too. So it's no wonder that teachers often talk about documentation as something that has increased, because it has. And now I think I have to move over to expectations. Society's expectations have changed from expectations that the students learn worthwhile things and can be part of the society, to multiple expectations. We have an expectation jam right now, I think, and this is impossible to live up to. It's not only the municipality or the national government, it's expectations from when you open the newspaper and something is a problem in the society. Well, couldn't school solve that? And we've gone from high status to lower status and pressure from several sides, I would say. And we talk about parents' expectations. Well, in the 90s, the expectations were on the student. They should behave themselves and learn good things. And now the expectations are in the school, on the teachers, and you're supposed to fix so my son is good. Is getting good grades. And this is maybe part of parents thinking themselves as customers who can demand things. And expectations from the responsible authority, well, I guess there were some expectations in the 90s, but I couldn't come up with something. And now, as you know, there are a lot that could make you stressful. Well, this was not so uplifting. And I could, of course, end here, but I can't resist giving you a few last thoughts from my point of view. As you all know, we have shortage of teachers in Sweden, a huge shortage. So what reforms? Well, I know we have had a lot of reforms, but I'm thinking of good reforms. could lead to many more young people wanting to be teachers. Well, I think they are no gamblers. They want to meet the same working conditions wherever they will get employed. So the very best we can do is to make every school a good school with the same conditions. Well, it seems difficult for politicians to give up the free school system or the private school system, but to minimize the negative effects of having turned the Swedish school into a market, I suggest a new short list. This is what I think we need. We need less new public management, more trust-based steering. That means we need a balance between resources and demands. And I think we need to feel that we are doing a great work for the society, not that we are a burden in someone's budget. I think we must have a new funding system, not based on individuals, more based on groups. We need regulated teaching hours. As I said before, this combination between unregulated teaching hours and constantly streamlining and constantly development is not making teachers healthier. I think we need another type of salary that is more predictable. That's what I would like. And I think we need a knowledge-based curriculum. And in the upper secondary school, I think we need a grading system based on a subject, not on courses. And we need to take a look at the school law. It's too many demands, it's too many expectations that we can't live up to, even if we have to. A funny thing I found during my little investigation is that it seems, you remember my boss from the 80s who took out something from his bookshelf? When the school was much more regulated than it is now, teachers experience a greater sense of freedom. One should never underestimate the power in the feeling of individual freedom. It's especially important for young people. So that's something to think about, to regulate, to make the work more, to get better freedom. If you're still interested, this presentation you find here. If you want to see what I meant by basundervisning, you can look at that. I have a Twitter account, email. Email didn't exist in the 1990s. And of course I have my blog. I must warn you, there is more than one blog post now, and all the others are about my family's renovation project. It's a cottage in the woods, so if you're not especially interested in times, don't go there. Thank you. And if you have any questions,